Greetings, students. Welcome to Complexity Fuel. My name is Mr. Little, and I'm looking at this picture here today. It's a painting from the early 20th century by an Italian painter named Fausto Zonero, an artist who was known for painting many images of the late Ottoman Empire or scenes from its history. And here we can see a painting of Mehmet II, who is famous for conquering Constantinople with his army on the way to conquer Constantinople. The title of the painting, if you weren't sure, was Mehmet II Conquering Constantinople. If you look right here, you can see an example of the Great Bombard. That is the large cannon that Mehmet II had commissioned specifically to knock down the walls of Constantinople. And here's another example of the same style of cannon that was commissioned sometime after the conquest of Constantinople on display in a museum. Now, contrary to popular belief, the cannons that Mehmet II brought with him did not topple the walls of Constantinople. Although they did do a great deal of damage, in the end, the cannon did not necessarily play the decisive role. Nonetheless, when we talk about the rise of land-based empires and even overseas empires in the APU world, we often talk about the use of gunpowder technology. I think that we all implicitly understand the power and the use of weapons, but I'd like to take that implicit understanding and make it a little bit more complex. So, when discussing the spread of cannon technology between 1400 and the 1700s, that is Unit 3.1, what do you actually have to know? Well, according to the College Board, you have to know that imperial expansion relied upon the increase in use of gunpowder, cannons, and armed trade to establish large empires in both hemispheres. So first of all, what is so great about cannons? In a world where we ingest movies and films in which individual soldiers and their courage with the use of small arms or with a handgun seems to make all the difference, it does seem odd to focus so much on cannons in particular, that is large artillery pieces. But in the days before the rise of massed armies with small arms, cannons were very important. Cannons, by lobbing masses of iron and rock, can knock down fortified cities. Cannons also make really loud noises. Their explosions can be heard from miles away, and they often scare horses. The use of cannons to disrupt cavalry charges and cavalry formations can be just as effective, even if the cannons don't actually hit the cavalry themselves. There was a drawback to this massive explosion in power, that sometimes the explosion literally blew the cannon into pieces and killed the entire crew, and may have actually happened to the cannon maker who created the cannon for Mehmet II to conquer Constantinople. Last but not least, cannons in general could also effectively defend cities, and so kings and rulers were not afraid to put them in their cities in order to keep them safe from invaders. And the fact that once gunpowder technology became widely available, it became a key part of every single army across Europe. You can see a table here in which the Ottoman Empire from the 1500s to the 1700s sees a 10-fold increase in artillerymen and an almost 20-fold increase in armorers, that is, people who can make cannons, as well as the use of cannons in the French Wars of Religion down here on the left, and the use of cannons during Akbar's conquests of South Asia on the right. Cannons were very important to the expansion of landed empires. Now, you might be wondering, how in the world do you go from gunpowder explosions to cannon technology? Well, thankfully, cannons are large pieces of metal, and both in Europe as well as in Asia and parts of Africa, states already had lots of experience forging large pieces of metal, specifically bells and gigantic Buddhas. The creation of these large bells, such as the Liddle'sglocke here, which is one of the oldest bells in Europe, would be a precursor to forging large pieces of metal, this time used to hurl other large pieces of metal. It's also worth noting that larger states means you can have larger sophisticated foundries. Forging metal is not an easy thing. And larger states also have a larger pool of metallic resources. Cannon technology became a mainstay of larger states because they had access to the means to make more cannons. And in general, there are two ways to make cannons before the rise of the Industrial Revolution. One is called forging. You take a heated piece of metal and you forge it using a hammer or other tools. And then there's casting. You make a mold of a cannon and then you pour molten metal into it. The other thing about cannons that sees their extensive use by larger states is that the complexity of cannons means that governments have to support a class of military experts who know how to use them, know how to aim them, know how to maintain them, and utilize them on the battlefield. Governments will be inclined to sponsor experts. This picture over here, we can see the improvement of cannon use via scientific instruments. It's worth noting that in Europe, Galileo Galilei, who we normally associate with the heliocentric universe, made quite a fortune applying his theories of projectile motion to the use of cannonballs. And when I talked about that class of experts, large states, large empires had the resources and logistics to train and maintain a large class of experts. So for example, up here we see excerpts from a Ming Dynasty military manual on exactly how to use a particular cannon. So scientific expertise and a large class of experts are a part of the reason why large states create and support large numbers of cannons. And finally, we have the question of technology transfer. We talk a lot about technology transfer in world history, but sometimes it's not so direct, and cannons can give us a really interesting example of that. So the Mughal Empire in South Asia is one of the gunpowder empire. That is, a state that utilized gunpowder to rapidly expand its territory and maintain its authority. By the 1500s, that is in the early stages of the Mughal Empire, observers from both the Islamic world and from Europe noted Mughal cannon technology used both forged cannons and casted cannons, that this cannon technology probably came from two different locations. Casting technology probably came from Central Asia, where the descendants of the Mongols, the Timurids, who then the Mughals were the descendants themselves of, and forging technology probably came from European traders who entered the Indian Ocean in the late 1400s. Cannons are really a big part of the conquests of South Asia. Babur, the founder of the Mughal Empire, used cannons in large numbers. He has said once after winning a victory over a larger foe, using cannons, he said, quote, "Swordsmen, though some Hindustanis may be, most of them are ignorant and unskilled in military move and stand," praising the military martial arts of his enemies, but noting that they lacked any sort of military tactics when it came to the use of cannons. So where can you use all of this particular information? Any essay that discusses the spread of technology, the growth of land and sea empires in units 3 and 4, but also up to unit 6, or the role of technology and science more generally. If you have an essay that covers any of these topics, discussing the growth of cannon use by empires in units 3 and 4 is a great way to make your essay a little more complex. Hey there. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this video was able to help you. If you appreciate this kind of work, please like and subscribe. And of course, I welcome any kind of feedback or suggestions, so feel free to leave a comment down below. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Mr. Little, and I'll see you next time.